Sorry about that. For some reason, my mic decided to mute itself. Good evening. Hope you're well. Hope everything is going fine in your world. I was saying, whilst I muted myself, that I wasn't going to start off the show in the same way that I always do. I usually start off the show in a. I usually start off the show by obviously welcoming you and saying I hope that you're well, but I want to say fair play to the fans at the end of the game to start things off. I want to say that I have a huge respect for the fans that were cheering at the end, because usually I'm quite critical of the Emirates crowd, and fair play to the ones that were still there and cheering. So I wanted to start off the show by saying that, and fair play to them. But I want to mainly talk about the players, because I'm not going to talk about Freddie, really. I'm not going to talk about Emery. I'm not going to talk about Stan Kroenke. I want to talk to you guys about the players, because I think that after a performance in which we have witnessed several high earners and very experienced performers not perform today, I think it is very important that actually we take a step back and go one by one through each and individual players and evaluate and assess and see where we're at. Because the reason why I don't want to talk about Freddie is because there's, in my opinion, what can the guy do? I mean, he put out the lineup that was the best with what we had. The only criticism I could say is maybe Lacazette could have come on, but he's been playing pretty darn poorly. I mean, there's not much more other than the fact for me to say that we'll go through each and individual player, and in the chat box, I'll be going through your comments on each and individual players and get your thoughts too. So let's start with the back and Bernd Leno. Let's start with Bernd Leno. So Leno, the way that I would describe him right now is that we don't really deserve him, because he is bailing us out, even in the games in which we're really, really struggling to sort of pick up any sort of result. He's still bailing us out with some really, really good saves. O'Malley says Leno is MVP. Again, I mean, the saves that he made at Norwich got us a point. He bailed out Callum Chambers when he was left one-on-one. At West Ham, he made a couple of very, very decent saves too. So, I mean, he's our best player by a distance. And when you're an Arsenal Football Club and your goalkeeper is your best player, that is saying something. That is really, really saying something. There's not much more you can say about Leno, because he's the one that we can say that is doing the best. But let's get some of your comments. Brian Robles says that fantastic save against De Bruyne. Zamir says that save from De Bruyne was save of the year. Genduzi is awful, says Bashal. We will get onto that, don't you worry. Dave Atkinson says, what would we do without Leno? Tekos Man says, I feel for Leno. I would not blame him if he left for Bayern in the near future. And that's actually a worrying factor, is that Bayern are sniffing around Bernd Leno, with Manuel Neuer coming to the end of his sort of prime time as a goalkeeper, and they'll be looking to sort of replace him. Ulreich is their backup, and he's not really someone that's going to take that role moving forward. So Leno is definitely going to be someone that Bayern look to as the guy to maybe replace Manuel Neuer. And if he was to leave, I mean, can you blame him? Can you blame him? We'll come on to players that might leave a little bit later on. Right back, Ainsley Maitland-Niles. This is a difficult one, because it's very, very easy to turn around and criticise a player playing out of position. It's very difficult to criticise someone and it be, what's the right words, impactful or meaningful. But the issue with Ainsley Maitland-Niles is that I think that he's, whilst playing out of position, he's not playing in a way which would, if I was looking on as a coach, I'd be thinking, right, yes, I had to play him out of position. Fair play to the kid for playing that role, but I'd be wanting more. I'd be wanting someone who's busting the gut in that role to prove to the manager that he deserves to be put where he should be put, which is for him in midfield. And Ainsley Maitland-Niles didn't really show that. Maybe he needs another move. Maybe he needs to even leave permanently. I don't think that we'll see Ainsley Maitland-Niles too long at Arsenal. if we are going to get realistic and we bring in someone that is ruthless as a coach, I don't think he'll be around for too long, because in the midfield section, he doesn't get into a midfield which is already hugely faltered. So there is that. Let's move into the centre-back position. Callum Chambers was playing on the right, had an absolute mare at certain points in the game. He doesn't look comfortable. He doesn't look like he has a lot of confidence. He's kicking the ball out a lot. Now, this is actually something that I take more personal with Callum Chambers, because we, not even with Callum Chambers, but the way that we kick the ball out, because a lot of people get very frustrated about the fact that Arsenal don't do that we don't kick the ball out, that we play ourselves into trouble and we hold on for the ball for too long in our own half, etc., etc. But actually, when you think about it, kicking the ball out 9 times out of 10, especially when it's rushed and it's rash, is just going to kick the ball to the opposition, and they're just going to attack you again. And that is what happened over and over again today. We kicked the ball out and he went straight to a Manchester City player. And I mean, what do you expect to happen from these players? And that was what Callum Chambers did. He passed it to the opposition players a lot. I'd be really concerned to see his passing accuracy. Let's get some of your comments on both Ainsley Maitland-Niles and Callum Chambers in the chat box. Avon says, how does AMN fit into our midfield? He probably doesn't. He plays as what I would imagine is more of a number 8. It would be his style rather than a defensive midfielder, even though he's played at right back for a lot of his time. O'Malley says AMN checks out of games. That's his biggest problem. John G. Maguire says, how can a championship side defend better than us? Is it the coaching? And Ainsley Maitland-Niles was never going to give us that what we want. He's just not going to give us that role. He's not going to give us defensive stability. He's not even going to give us what we need going forwards, because I don't think he's got the end product that is needed from a wide fullback, especially at one of the biggest clubs like Arsenal, to really take you forwards. Tyrone says AMN is too laid back in any position that he plays. No More Champagne says you can't sell him because you have no backup right back. And that is true. We don't. I mean, you could argue Callum Chambers is a backup right back. You could argue that Shkodran Mustafi can play that role, and he has done. But Emery wanted to sign a right back as backup in the summer, and we didn't. And that's definitely coming back to hurt us. In terms of Chambers, let's see what some of you guys have been saying on Chambers. London Old School reckons that Chambers and Louise are better in midfield. Of course, Callum Chambers playing at Fulham did very well there in that deep defensive midfield role. Dark Druid says Callum Chambers has been passed about on loan and he's our best defender. Sad times. I mean, that's definitely a damning indictment of our team. In terms of moving into the left-hand side of the centre-back role, then we have to talk about a certain Socrates. And I still struggle to understand what the thinking was at the club when they brought in Socrates. We knew that we needed a centre-back when we paid, I think it was 15, 16 million for this guy. It was during that period of time where we brought in Socrates and Mkhitaryan and Aubameyang. And these are all players in and around and over 30 years old. And we thought we were signing experience. But actually what we did is that in Socrates and Mkhitaryan, to a certain extent, signed flawed players that haven't really showed that they, at the current time that we signed them, were going to be on the rise or maintaining their top class form. And Socrates has been in his first season, he did okay. He wasn't disastrous, but he did some silly things and he did some all right things. But I would still classify the signing of Socrates an absolute disaster when you consider that he was the first centre-back signing to come straight into the first team for quite a while. And we had the opportunity to spend more money, and there were other players around like Johnny Evans and Soyuncu, who was at Freiburg at the time, that we could have signed for less, and we didn't. And those types of decisions have really cost Arsenal. We've signed the wrong players, and Socrates epitomises everything about the point that Arsenal just don't seem to sign the right players. Omar says that Socrates was shocking. Gary Hardy says Socrates should have been a stopgap for 1 year until we got someone this year. Peace Tembo says that we should play Zach Medley over Socrates. Aussie Gooner says Socrates was cheap. That's why we got him. And the only reason that we did. Sven had an inroad due to his previous Dortmund connection. And we thought, wow, under 20, let's get it done. We are a joke. I mean, I can't disagree much with what you're saying there, Aussie. He was a very cheap option as an experienced centre back, and we made that call. And arguably, you would say that is now the wrong call. Amraj says Socrates and Mickey are massive frauds. Unai says, am I going to blame the fans again? Scroll back to the start of the video if you want to get my feelings on the fans. Ricardo Harewood says, all our centre-backs have no pace, so the fear of getting beat by players for pace handicaps them. You don't need... You genuinely don't need centre-backs to be rapid to have a solid defence. You need defenders to have positional awareness. You need defenders to have good positional awareness as well. You needed to have good spatial awareness. You can see I'm using this word awareness quite a lot because we lack it in all of our centre-backs. And you need to have them to be able the ability to pass the ball out from the back confidently and with ability. And none of Arsenal centre-backs really have that trait in them. Maybe Mustafi, in terms of passing it out from the back, is probably our best passer of the ball as a centre-back, but defensively, he's blooming awful. So I think that when it comes to the pace side of things, I don't think the pace is the biggest problem. I just think that in terms of their quality and their consistency as a centre-back, they don't have that ability, let alone the pace side of things. Pace for me is for a centre-back is a bonus. I don't necessarily think that it's up there. You look at Mats Hummels in his prime, was an absolutely fantastic centre-back, but slow as anything. We even look internally, you look at Per Mertesacker. Defensively, I really liked Per Mertesacker, and he was one of the slowest players we've ever had, beyond maybe Mikel Arteta. But defensively, he was capable of putting in absolutely fantastic performances, like in the FA Cup final, for example. So for me, I don't think pace is the key thing. Let's look at left back. We're going to have to sprint through this because I did say I was going to be off by 1:45, so I only got 8 minutes left. Left back, I mean, Kolasinac came off injured. He looked bright when he came on at the start. I thought he was one of the better performers, actually. He couldn't do much about De Bruyne's goal, or rather Sterling's goal. And that he was completely caught by the deflection. I can't blame him too much for that. I know that people will turn around and say that Kolasinac isn't good enough, and they're probably right. In terms of quality, he's not good enough. But actually, over the last couple of games or so, he's looked better than Kieran Tierney for me. And I think it's a big blow that we could possibly lose him. An even bigger blow that when Bukayo Saka comes on, very inexperienced. It's hardly worth even analysing Bukayo Saka playing in that role, because he doesn't want to play there, and he's not going to play there in the future, and it is a stopgap. It's just a make do while we have that player there, and there's not much point talking about it. But Kolasinac came off injured. I think that's going to be big if we have no recognised left back over the Christmas period, and we have to play Saka there. I cannot see us picking up any mere amount of points in the games that we need to, in these tough games that we've got coming up, and it's really, really, really concerning. Moving into midfield, Lucas Torreira. Almost, I don't really look back, thinking back on the game, think that Lucas Torreira did what he did last season. He looks like a player that doesn't want to be there, quite like a lot of the other players. I think that he thrives next to someone who gives him stability and gives him security, and we don't have that because we played Matteo Guendouzi, who has gone off an absolute cliff in the last few games. And when you consider that Lucas Torreira was, when he came in, considered to be one of the best up-and-coming Terrier, Kante-esque midfielders that were out there in Europe, and the way that he's declined, and the way that Guendouzi has declined, and the opinion about these players has gone down dramatically, it goes to show that at Arsenal there is a perpetuating issue amongst how fan opinion goes into these players. And often we look at these players and we forget what they were like, and now we realize that, oh, these guys are performing so poorly week in, week out. And actually, there is, when you look at what they were like and what they are now under Unai Emery, I mean, the system didn't help them, but players are getting worse at Arsenal, is my point after that little waffle. But players are getting worse. We haven't got anyone that's improving them. There's no one that looks like they're getting better, other than players by natural selection and natural growth that are getting better. But these players are getting worse. And you look at other teams across the league and you look at other players that are improving. You look at Chelsea with Mason Mount, who has improved since coming back from Derby. You look at Manchester United, you look at how much Rashford has improved. You look at how much Daniel James has come on this season. You go to Manchester City, you look at the rise of Phil Foden. You look at Leicester, you look how good that Ashley Barnes, but Harvey Barnes has done really, really well. You look at Jose Perez, who when I thought signed for £30 million for Newcastle, they paid a hell of a lot of money for someone that I didn't really rate too highly. And yet he's come on. Arsenal don't have that same situation. Our players are declining and they're going down at a rate of knots. That means that when they do, because of the atmosphere around the group and the fans and the stadium, it means that unfortunately they don't get that chance to be supported in the same way that maybe other clubs do, because it's such under the spotlight. And I completely understand that situation. Vincent says, Tom, when will anyone admit that our players aren't good enough? No matter the manager we will get, still 45 players who need to go right now. Survival is the option. I mean, survival, when we talk about Arsenal was just trying to survive, that really goes to show what we're talking about. Tekos man, Guendouzi's constant diving makes it very hard for me to like him. And even when I've lost that. Even the team, when he plays, sometimes the comments scroll up and you just lose them. Carrie Hardy says this score against City is not any worse than the last few games against them. I mean, I think it is worse. Maybe not the scoreline, but I think the game is worse because of how we performed. Let's look at the front line. Mesut Ozil, awful behaviour coming off the pitch. Why we're 3-0 down, we need a goal, trudging off the pitch like Xhaka did. I'm not going to treat them any differently. They both did extremely silly things. Mesut Ozil kicking his gloves. What sort of example does that set for the youngsters that are out there? You look at Nicola Pepe, couldn't really put his stamp on the game quite like he wanted to and like he was able to, and that basically comes down to because we were playing against a very good side that knew how to contain him and knew that he's only got 1 foot really, and they showed him onto that other side all the time and defended really, really well against him. I still hold my reservations against Nicola Pepe. I don't think that you can judge him too much just yet. I think we need to wait till the next coach comes in the system and hopefully it suits the Ivorian. You look at the front line, Aubameyang. I mean, this guy's going to have 1 year left on his contract, and if he's going to stay next season or the season after that, he's going to want a lot more. But in my head, I'm thinking, is that the type of striker that we need? He scores a lot of goals because he's a good poacher and he gets in the right position. But my head, I'm thinking, do we need actually a striker more like Jesus that would drop in and actually drag the team forwards and create chances for himself rather than needing the support? Because at Arsenal, we don't have a team that's going to support the striker quite like we need them to. We need someone that is going to grab the ball and do the work. Whereas Aubameyang is a world-class finisher and poacher, but he's not someone that's going to drive you forwards. He's not someone that's going to take the ball and make things happen. And that's where I think that we need to be a bit more savvy with our striker selection. One guy that will take the ball and will create chances and will do a lot for the team is the only man that I can still say can hold his head high after one of these games, and that's Gabriel Martinelli. Gabriel Martinelli is the best thing besides maybe Bernd Leno to happen to us this season. On performances, you'd say Bernd Leno is player of the season, but in terms of player like impact this season, and the only reason that I can see any sort of light at the end of the tunnel for us is because of Martinelli. And the scariest thing is that I think that he will quickly see what's happening at this club, quickly see that this is a stepping stone rather than the pinnacle, which Arsenal isn't anymore, and he'll go. And that's the biggest shame that I think that we can see about Arsenal right now, is that we're not a club that players want to stay at. We're a club that players want to move to, get some experience at a good club, and then move on to even bigger and better things. And that's just the way I see Martinelli going. Omar says, I feel sorry for Martinelli. The kid was outstanding yet again and deserves so much better. Official JK says, I honestly don't know why everyone is angry. Did you really think we were going to beat Man City? Did you really? And the answer that I give to that, JK, is that I didn't expect us to get a result today, really. I put an optimistic 2-2 because that's what I'm like. I'm very optimistic. But at the same time, I don't think that disappointment comes from not thinking we were going to get anything. I think that the attitude there that you show, JK, is saying basically a defeatist attitude that do we really think we were going to win? Probably not. But, I mean, I would like to see my players put more of an effort in than I did today, and we just didn't see that. Goose says we are a club that cannot play football. John Cronin says we've always been that type of club. I don't think that's true. I don't think we have always been like that. I think players used to move to the Arsenal because they thought they had reached the peak of their career, and we don't have that, and we don't have that anymore. I'm going to have to run, I'm afraid, this evening. I've got some plans, and I need to sort of think about this game. You will be a podcast tomorrow with a couple of the boys, so make sure you tune in for that. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you have, please give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and turn those notifications on so you can tune into our live shows and get your comments read out. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, hence why it's quite monotonous today and not really the enthusiastic. But we are in new surroundings, as you can see. Finally moved in. Hopefully, going to add some colour to the wall behind me because it's very white. It's very clean in here, and I don't like it. So I will see you again very, very soon. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Enjoy the rest of your evening if you can. But of course, what can you expect from Arsenal these days? And I suppose, as those fans sang at the end, thank God for those guys. And as always, up the Arsenal.